I wasn't supposed to know, but I found the email. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head, even now. Not what it said, though that matters, but the fact that I found it at all. The accident of it. My son left his laptop open on my kitchen table when he came to help me with the gutters. I wasn't snooping. I needed to look up the weather forecast for Saturday. His browser was open. The email was right there in the chain, forwarded with the entire history visible. Subject line, Dad's situation. I saw those two words, and something in my chest tightened. A physical thing. Like someone had taken my breath and folded it back inside itself. I'm an accountant. I spent 43 years reading numbers, interpreting documents, seeing what people tried to hide in spreadsheets and footnotes. I know how to read between lines, but I didn't want to read these lines. I wanted to close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen it. I almost did. My hand was actually on the keyboard to minimize the window when I saw my daughter's name, then my other son's name. All three of them were in this conversation. All three of my children, talking about me without me there to defend myself or explain, or simply exist as a human being in the room with them. We need to move the money before he knows. That phrase just sat there on my screen, backlit and impossible to ignore. It was like finding out you're already dead, but nobody told you. Like discovering you'd become a problem to be solved rather than a father to be included. Before he knows. As if I'm not already here. As if I'm not still making my own decisions, paying my own bills, managing my own life. As if the moment they decided something needed to happen, I ceased to exist as a person with agency and became a problem that needed solving. A situation. Something to be managed, strategized, coordinated. Not a person, not Dad, just a situation. I read the entire thread, start to finish. It took maybe 5 minutes, but it was the longest 5 minutes I've had in years. Each word felt like a small cut. Nothing that drew blood immediately, but accumulated wounds nonetheless. My youngest, Sarah, started it. She wrote that she was worried about my memory. She said I forgot her birthday dinner last month. That I said I'd be there, and then just didn't show up. That it wasn't like me. I think we need to talk about taking some control of his finances, just as a precaution. Those words made me feel small. Made me feel like I was already slipping away, already becoming unreliable, already becoming the kind of person who couldn't be trusted with his own life. My oldest, Michael, responded the same day. I've been thinking the same thing. He's been resistant when I've asked about his accounts. I think he's confused about what he has where. We could set up a trust that protects him without having to make it seem like we're retaking over. The cruelty of that final phrase was breathtaking. Without having to make it seem like we're taking over. They were planning to take over and specifically planning how to hide it. They were crafting deception with precision. Then my middle child, David, added his voice. We should move fast on this. The lawyers are expensive, and if we do it while he's still mentally competent, it will hold up better in court. If we wait and something happens, it could get messy. Mentally competent. They were using legal language. They were planning. This wasn't a casual conversation about whether to help their aging father. This was a strategy. A coordinated strategy, across all three of them, developed without my knowledge or input. They were discussing me like I was property, like I was an estate to be managed, like I wasn't a person who could hear them if they bothered to speak to me directly. I forgot your birthday dinner, Sarah. I forgot. I didn't forget. I confused the date. I thought it was the following weekend. I called you the next morning to apologize. I remember that conversation clearly. You said it was fine. You said you understood these things happen. You didn't mention it again until now, apparently, when you needed evidence that I'm losing my mind. You collected my mistake like it was a data point in a case you were building against me. You added it to a file you were constructing. You turned my confusion into proof of my incompetence. My hands were shaking when I closed the laptop. I actually closed it very slowly, like the screen might break if I moved too fast. Like the entire physical world had become fragile now that I knew what I knew. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time after that. The kitchen where I've eaten breakfast for 32 years. The kitchen where your mother made coffee every morning at 5:30 until the cancer took that from her. Took everything from her. Took her. The kitchen where I've paid bills and written checks and managed my own financial life for decades. The kitchen where I've been present and accountable and responsible. And suddenly, sitting there alone with the dishwasher, humming quietly in the background, I became someone whose competence was being evaluated in email chains I wasn't supposed to see. I became a problem that needed solving. I became invisible to the people I'd raised. I want you to understand something. I'm not a fool. I know I'm 74 years old. I know my body doesn't work the way it used to. I forget things sometimes. Where I put my glasses. What I was supposed to pick up at the store. Whether I took my blood pressure medication this morning. I move slower. My hearing isn't what it was. I have to ask people to repeat themselves, and I see them getting impatient with that. I notice. I'm not blind to my own diminishment, but my mind is still here. My mind is the one place that still feels like mine, the one territory I haven't surrendered. And my children had just decided to take that from me too. Michael had asked me last spring about my accounts. I remember that now, reading his email in a new light. He'd said something like, "Dad, wouldn't it be easier if I knew where everything was? In case something happened to you?" At the time, I thought he was being thoughtful. I felt grateful, actually. I felt like he was stepping into the role of responsible son, the eldest, taking on the burden of knowing the family finances. Now I understood he was doing reconnaissance. He was gathering intelligence. He was interviewing me without telling me I was being interviewed. Sarah had asked me twice in the past 6 months if I was managing okay. She'd mentioned an article about elder fraud. She'd suggested I might want to simplify things. I'd told her I was fine. I'd told her I liked managing my own finances. I'd meant it. I still mean it. And she'd taken that as confirmation that I was in denial. My assertion of my own competence became, in her mind, evidence of my incompetence. The more I insisted I was fine, the more convinced she became that I wasn't. David had tried to introduce me to his lawyer friend. He'd said it casually, like a social introduction. "Come meet Brian. He's a financial attorney, and I think you two would get along." But now I understood it was an interview. He was vetting someone who could help them do this quickly and quietly. He was introducing me to the person who would help orchestrate my financial takeover. They had each played their part perfectly. They had each gathered their data. They had compared notes, shared observations, coordinated strategy. And they had done all of this without ever asking me directly if I needed help. Without ever saying, "Dad, we're worried." Without ever giving me a chance to explain that I wasn't confused. I was just tired sometimes. Tired and alone and missing your mother so much that some days I forget what day it is because the days all feel the same now. Gray and repetitive and long. But tired isn't incompetent. Grief isn't dementia. There's a difference, but they couldn't see it. Or they chose not to. I didn't confront them that day. I didn't even mention that I'd seen the email. I did something worse. I sat with it. I let it settle into my bones like a bad diagnosis. I replayed every recent conversation through this new lens of betrayal. Every question became an interrogation. Every offer of help became an attempt at control. Every expression of concern became a lie they were telling me to my face while they coordinated behind my back. The Thanksgiving dinner where Michael asked about my investment strategy. That was reconnaissance. The phone call where Sarah asked if I'd thought about selling the house. That was gathering evidence that I was overwhelmed. The casual lunch with David where he mentioned how busy I seemed. That was building a case. I wondered how long they'd been planning this. Weeks? Months? Had they discussed it at Christmas? Had they been watching me through the entire holiday, cataloging my mistakes, confirming their suspicions? Had they looked at me that day and already written me off as someone who could not be trusted with his own life? That week, I called my financial advisor. I told him I wanted to review my estate plan. I told him I wanted to make sure everything was exactly as I wanted it. He was surprised. He'd done my planning 5 years ago, and nothing had changed, but he set up a meeting. I needed to hear from someone professional that I wasn't losing my mind. I needed an external confirmation that my financial decisions were still sound, that I could still be trusted with my own money. I also did something I'm not proud of. I started researching power of attorney laws in my state. I read about guardianship proceedings. I read about elder financial abuse. I learned about conservatorships and how they work, and how easily they can be triggered if someone decides you are not competent. I learned that my children could potentially force this through if they had enough medical evidence. One doctor saying I was showing signs of cognitive decline could be enough. And where was that evidence? In email chains they'd sent to each other. In observations they'd shared. In a narrative they'd constructed without my input. And somewhere in that reading, I realized I was scared, not of my children doing something wrong. I was scared of being rendered invisible, of becoming the kind of person whose life is managed by committee, whose choices don't matter, whose voice isn't heard. I was terrified of becoming a problem instead of a person, of being managed instead of included, of losing control of the one thing I had left, myself. My wife used to say I was too rational, too willing to see all sides of a problem. That was my training as an accountant. Everything could be analyzed. Everything had multiple perspectives. You could look at a situation from a dozen angles and find legitimate reasoning on all of them. But sitting with this betrayal, in the dark hours of the morning, when I couldn't sleep and the silence felt like it was pressing down on me, I realized I didn't want to see all sides. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be right. I wanted them to be wrong. The worst part was that I understood why they were doing it, and I hated myself for understanding it. I could still do the math on my children's fear. Sarah's marriage was ending. I knew that without her telling me. I could read it in how seldom she called, how quick her voice was when she did. She was stressed. She needed stability. She needed money. Michael had mentioned a business opportunity that needed capital. He was restless. He was ambitious. He wanted to expand his consulting firm, and he needed investors. He was looking at my assets and seeing possibility. David had just had his hours cut at work. He had a child starting college. He had bills piling up. He was looking at an aging father with a paid-off house and investments, and wondering how long it would be before that money could be released to him. 3 adult children with their own financial pressures, looking at an aging father with assets and no wife to help manage him. I wasn't a problem to them because I was incompetent. I was a problem because I was inconvenient, because my money was sitting there, manageable, and they needed it to be managed differently, in a way that benefited them. I'm not naive. I know that's what this was about. Not my memory, not my competence, not their love, their need, their fear, their ambition, their desperation. And I had to sit with the fact that I'd raised them. I'd paid for their educations. I'd helped them through their struggles. I'd been present and available. I'd been the father who showed up. I'd been the accountant who explained compound interest to Michael when he was 12. I'd been the one who paid for Sarah's MBA, even when it meant working overtime for 8 years. I'd been the one who helped David with the down payment on his first house. I'd given and given and given. And somewhere in that, I'd failed to teach them that I mattered, that my autonomy mattered, that asking me directly was more important than coordinating behind my back. I thought about changing my will. I spent an entire Saturday afternoon sitting in my study with my legal documents spread in front of me like evidence at a trial. My hands moved through the papers, pulling out the ones I'd read 100 times, the trust agreements, the beneficiary designations, the power of attorney forms I'd never signed. I could feel my heart racing as I touched each page. I imagined leaving everything to charity. I imagined their faces when the lawyer told them the money was gone. I imagined the shock and the fury and the recognition that they'd miscalculated, that they'd assumed I would be grateful for their control, that they'd assumed I wouldn't fight back. I spent hours sitting there, pen in hand, staring at blank spaces where I could write new instructions. The pen felt heavy in my fingers. I sat so still that my breathing became the only sound in the room. The clock on the wall ticked past 5 minutes, then 10, then 30. I imagined all of that with a clarity that frightened me. The anger felt good. It felt clean. It felt like power. It felt like my only remaining authority in a life that was slipping away. But I knew that changing my will wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't undo the conspiracy. It wouldn't make me less invisible. It would just be revenge. And I didn't want to spend my final years as someone defined by revenge. So I put the pen down, and I sat with that choice, the hardest choice, the choice to forgive them before they asked, the choice to reclaim myself without destroying them. I never changed the will. I went to the financial advisor meeting. I sat across from him in his office, and I asked him to walk me through everything. My accounts, my assets, my liabilities, my projections. I asked him if he thought I was making good decisions. He said I was. He said my portfolio was well managed and my planning was solid. He said he wished all his clients were as organized as I was. I felt something loosen in my chest when he said that. A validation I desperately needed. I asked him if I should do anything different, if I should change my estate plan, if I should be concerned about anything. He looked at me carefully. He said, "Bob, is something wrong?" And I told him everything. The email, the conspiracy, the fear, the anger, the recognition that ID raised 3 people who loved me enough to plan my life without including me in the conversation. I told him about the dates Sarah confused, about Michael's questions, about David's lawyer friend. I told him that I felt invisible in my own family. He listened. Then he said, "Have you considered that they might be right to be worried, even if they're going about it the wrong way?" I hated that question. I hated it because I'd already asked myself the same thing. The truth is that I am getting older. My reflexes are slower. My energy is different. I do forget things sometimes. And yes, I'm lonely. Yes, I've been leaning more on my children for companionship since your mother died. Yes, I probably have been a little resistant when they offer suggestions about my life, because accepting help feels like admitting I can't do it alone anymore. And I can't. Not completely. I need help sometimes. I need it. But needing help isn't the same as needing to be controlled. There's a difference between supporting someone through aging and taking over their life without their permission. But here's what I also know. My mind is still mine. My choices still matter. My voice still deserves to be heard. I decided to confront them, not with anger. I decided that was too easy. I decided instead to confront them with clarity. I invited all 3 of them to dinner at my house. I said I wanted to spend time together. I didn't mention the email. I cooked. I made your mother's pot roast recipe, the one she kept written on a card in the kitchen drawer. The recipe I've made maybe 3 times in the 8 years since she died, because making it means remembering how much better hers always tasted, how her hands move differently with food than mine do. But I made it that night. I set the table properly, the way we used to do for holidays. I lit candles. I opened a bottle of wine that had been sitting in the rack for years. When they arrived, I could feel them trying to read me. Sarah came in and hugged me longer than usual. Michael immediately asked if I was feeling okay. David just looked nervous. They knew something was different. They could sense it. The change in the air between us. We ate. We talked about their lives, their work, their partners, their plans. Sarah told me about her separation. Michael talked about his business expansion. David mentioned his son's college applications. We fell into the comfortable patterns we've established over years. And then, after dessert, after I'd cleared the plates and made coffee, I told them I needed to talk about something important. I told them I'd found the email. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It filled the entire room like something alive, like something with weight and substance and presence. Michael was the first to speak. He said, "Dad, we were just trying to help." I said, "You were trying to help without asking if I wanted help. You were trying to plan my life based on assumptions you'd made about my competence, assumptions you never checked directly with me. You decided I was a problem, and then you coordinated how to solve me without including me in the conversation." Sarah started to cry. She said, "We just didn't want to worry you." I said, "You worried me far more by deciding I wasn't worth talking to. You worried me more by treating me like I was already gone, like I was already invisible, like my voice didn't matter." David didn't say anything. He just looked at his shoes, at the floor, at anything but me. I told them that my financial advisor confirmed my estate planning is solid. I told them I'm not confused about my finances. I told them that if there comes a time when I genuinely need help, I'm capable of asking for it. And I told them that until that time comes, I need them to trust me. I need them to see me as a person with agency, not a problem to manage. I need them to see me. And then I said something I hadn't said to them since they were children. I said, "I'm sorry I raised you to think you needed to sneak around me. I'm sorry I raised you to believe that coordination and planning behind my back was acceptable. That's on me. That's something I need to understand about myself. But it ends here. We start talking to each other directly, or we don't talk at all." Michael left angry. He said I was being defensive and irrational. He said they were trying to protect me. He said I was rejecting help because of my pride. He might have been right. Maybe some of it is pride. Maybe some of it is fear dressed up as principle. But I also know that I'm still here. I'm still making decisions about my life. I'm still capable of determining my own future. Sarah came back the next day. She called first, asked if she could come over. We sat in the kitchen with coffee, and she apologized. She said she understood my perspective now. She said they'd been scared. She said they didn't know how to support an aging parent without trying to control him. She said that was their failure, not mine. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I discovered their conspiracy. And I told her that being scared was okay. Being worried about your parent was okay. But turning that worry into a secret plan was not okay. I told her I needed them to trust me. And I told her I needed to trust them. That trust had been broken. Rebuilding it would take time, would take intention, would take choosing each other again. David called me on the phone. He said he'd talked to Michael. He said he'd told Michael that I was right. He said they'd been wrong to exclude me. He said they wanted to find a new way to move forward, one where I was included in decisions about my own life. I didn't forgive them immediately. I'm still processing the betrayal. There are still moments when I feel a flash of anger. Moments when I remember the assumption in that email chain, the certainty that they knew what was best for me. Moments when I remember being written off by my own children. But I've also started to understand something deeper. They were terrified. They were terrified of losing me. They were terrified of not being prepared when the worst happened. They were terrified of the responsibility of an aging parent. And instead of talking to me about that fear, they created a plan. They created the illusion of control. And in doing that, they created a situation where I felt like I'd been replaced by a version of myself they de-invented. A version they could manage. A version without agency. a version that didn't matter. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust them the way I did before, but I do know that I've reclaimed something essential. I've reclaimed my authority over my own life. I've made it clear that my consent matters, that my voice matters, that I'm not a problem to be solved, but a person to be included. This is what it means to be invisible in your own family. Not that they don't see you, but that they see you and decide you're not worth consulting. And then they plan their life around managing your life without your input. They decide what's best for you, and they do it quietly. They do it while you're still alive and still capable and still deserving of a voice. But they decide your voice doesn't matter anymore. I'm done being invisible. The email sits in my mind less often now. Some days I forget about it entirely. Other days it hits me fresh, and I feel that tightness in my chest again. But mostly, I'm focused on moving forward, on rebuilding relationships with my children, on terms where I am treated as an equal participant in my own life. If you're listening to this, you probably know what I mean. You've probably felt it too. That moment when someone you love stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a problem. That moment when you realize your consent doesn't matter to people who claim to care about you. That moment when you understand that you've become invisible in your own story. I am telling you this because I need you to know that it's okay to reclaim your authority. It's okay to refuse to be invisible. It's okay to demand to be consulted about decisions that affect your life, even when the people making those decisions think they're helping you. It's okay to say no. It's okay to demand better. It's okay to draw a line and hold it. You're still here. You're still in charge of your own story. Don't let anyone write your ending for you without your permission. Don't let them make you disappear while you're still alive to protest it. Don't accept invisibility as the price of being old. My children and I are finding our way back to each other. It's not the way it was before. That trust, once broken, doesn't simply repair itself, but it's something. It's a beginning. And I'm learning that sometimes the price of being seen is making sure you're willing to be fully, honestly seen, including your anger, your fear, your refusal to disappear. I'm not invisible, not yet. And I'll spend whatever time I have left making sure I'm not, making sure my voice is heard, making sure my choices matter, making sure that when I'm gone, people remember that I was here, that I mattered, that I was a person, not a problem to be solved. That's what I want my children to understand. That's what I want everyone to understand. You're still here. You still matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.